Hey guys, before we dive in, take a deep breath. Food history is always fun until it isn't. And today we're heading straight into the zone where your stomach might file a complaint. If you're eating right now, put the plate down. If you're not, congratulations, you've made the smartest decision of the day. We're about to explore 30 real foods humans actually ate. Not a YouTube challenge, not a dare. Actual dishes our ancestors looked at and said, yeah, let's try that. By the end of this journey, you'll thank your refrigerator like it's a UNESCO cultural treasure. And hey, if you enjoy the stories school never bothered to teach, hit subscribe and stick with me. All right, relax. We'll start with the lightest dish on the list. And by lightest, I mean historically light. Your stomach will not agree. 1. Mouse wine. This is the ancient version of trusting grandma's home remedy and instantly regretting it. In old China and Korea, if you were sick, a healer might hand you a bottle of rice wine that looked completely normal until you noticed the tiny pink baby mice floating inside like they were performing some kind of underwater dance routine. The recipe? Simple. They took a whole litter of newborn mice, dropped them into rice wine, sealed the jar, and let it ferment for over a year. The belief back then was that the youthful energy of baby mice would infuse the wine, turning it into a miracle cure for everything from coughing to liver issues. The theory sounded promising until you actually had to drink it. Ancient people called it restorative. Modern people call it a valid reason to stay sick at home. And that's just dish number one. Trust me, it only escalates from here. Two, though, in the Arctic, nobody gets to be fancy about vegetables. You can go months without seeing anything green unless you count ice reflecting the sky. So when your body needs vitamins, Arctic people had to find another source. And they did, in a way only a brutal environment could inspire. They ate partially digested plants straight from a reindeer's stomach. Right after taking down a reindeer, they would open the stomach and scoop out the warm, soft, slightly fermented mix of moss, lichen, and grasses the animal had been chewing all day. This is not meat. This is not organ soup. It is a salad that has already been pre-processed by one of nature's most efficient digestive systems. It was the only way humans could absorb nutrients their own stomachs were not built to handle. If you describe it in modern terms, it is basically the most extreme green smoothie imaginable. No blender, no ice, no chia seeds, just the truth that the reindeer did the hard work first, and humans took the final result. Some people say it is warm, slightly tangy, like a vegetable porridge with notes of earth and a hint of snow forest breath. To Arctic communities, this was not a dare, it was a strategy. It kept them alive through long winters and let them use every part of the animal. In the harshest conditions on Earth, this dish proves how smart ancient humans were when survival was the only thing on the menu. 3. If there were an award for a dish that requires absolute steel nerves, the Inuit kiviak from Greenland would be a top contender. The recipe sounds like something invented by a bored daredevil. Take a seal, remove the organs to turn it into one giant pouch, then stuff it with about 500 small birds called auk. Yes, 500. No plucking, no gutting, no prep work. Everything goes in whole. After that, they sew the seal shut, smear it with fat to seal every gap, bury it, and weigh it down with stones. It ferments underground for anywhere from 3 to 7 months, long enough for the flock inside to turn into what the Inuit consider a high-energy winter food. When dug up, kiviak has a smell that explorers once described as a blend of strong cheese, 3-day-old fish, and what nobody wanted to finish describing. The traditional way to eat it is raw. You pick up a bird that is now soft like butter, pull the head off, and eat the rest. For the Inuit, it is perfect winter protein. For outsiders, it feels like a nature documentary scene someone forgot to censor. The funny part is that this is not a bravery challenge. It is tradition, a brilliant method of preserving calories in the frozen world, and proof that sometimes, to survive, you follow a process no Michelin chef would ever sign off on. 4. Surströmming is proof that humans never needed to invent biological weapons. They just had to let fish ferment a little too long. In Sweden, this Baltic herring is made by letting the fish ferment in wooden barrels, then canning it while it is still very much active. The result is a can that swells like it is trying to escape its own destiny. When you open it, the smell has been described in many creative ways, none of them pleasant. Some say it is a blend of rotten eggs, spoiled butter, and a very depressed ocean. Others compare it to realizing your fridge has been unplugged for a week. The smell is so powerful that several airlines banned passengers from bringing surströmming on board because the combination of pressure and aroma was considered a safety hazard. Swedes eat it in a very specific way. Open the can outdoors, stand upwind, and use crisp bread to sandwich the fish with onions and potatoes. If watching this makes you think it looks like a ritual designed to neutralize odor, you are not wrong. For Scandinavians, it is a long standing tradition. For outsiders, it is the exact border between local cuisine and sensory experiment. Surströmming is not just food, it is a courage test nobody warns you about. 5. If you think pancakes are cute, harmless, breakfast approved comfort food, old school Scandinavians would like to introduce you to their version. Blood pancakes. Not a metaphor, not a poetic name. Actual pancakes. With one tiny adjustment. The liquid in the batter is replaced with animal blood, usually pig's blood. In the historical context, it makes perfect sense. When livestock was slaughtered, nothing went to waste, including the part modern people usually pretend doesn't exist. The blood was whisked, mixed with flour, onions, and spices, and fried into thin, savory pancakes with a dark red, black color that looks like a prop from a vampire movie. People who have tried it say the flavor is like a mild liver, with that metallic edge blood always brings. It is often served with lingonberry jam, because if you are already committed enough to eat blood pancakes, adding a little jam to soften the emotional impact is the polite thing to do. Watching people in the past enjoy this dish, you immediately understand their philosophy. If you raise a pig, you use every last drop of it. This was not a shock value snack, it was essential food, iron rich, high energy, perfect for surviving long, frozen winters. The dish still exists today, and many Scandinavians see it as nostalgic comfort food, a childhood memory that, for some people, is better heard than tasted. Six bat soup is one of those dishes that makes you wonder if our ancestors were watching too many horror movies before horror movies even existed. In parts of Asia and the Pacific Islands, the recipe is exactly what it sounds like. Take a whole bat, drop it into a pot, add coconut milk, ginger, a few spices, and call it a day. No plucking, no trimming, no delicate prep work. The bat goes straight from the cave to the pot like an unexpected cameo nobody asked for. People who have tried it say the meat is soft and not bad at all. The problem is not the taste, it is everything else. When you lift the lid and see tiny eyes staring back at you, wings spread like it is preparing for one last takeoff, and an aroma that everyone describes as something between wild musk and a perfume that would never pass product testing, the experience becomes memorable. The dish was born out of survival, scarce protein sources, tropical wilderness, and the simple rule that if it was edible, it was worth a try. For locals, this is tradition. For outsiders, it feels less like lunch and more like a psychological exam. Not everyone can calmly lift a whole bat out of a bowl without thinking of Halloween. But for many communities, this was once an important source of nutrition, even if its presentation would make any modern diner rethink their menu choices. 7. In the Tudor court, a chef's job wasn't to cook something delicious. Their mission was to make guests wonder whether they were having dinner or watching an unsupervised science experiment. And nothing embodied that spirit better than the legendary bird inside a bird inside a bird. The ancient version of someone looking at a chicken and saying, "What if we stuffed more things into this?" The process sounded like a reality show challenge. Start with a tiny bird, stuff it into a chicken, stuff the chicken into a goose, then put the whole thing inside a giant turkey. This wasn't a recipe, it was someone testing the limits of physics. The funny part is, nobody expected it to taste good. There is no universe where 4 layers of meat cook evenly. The outside dries out, the inside stays undercooked, and the middle exists for reasons no one remembers. But nobles didn't care. The dish was basically a flex. I am wealthy enough to waste an entire barnyard for shock value. Picture a Tudor chef packing layer after layer of poultry with the seriousness of someone assembling a NASA payload. Then imagine the dish landing on the banquet table while every guest tilts their head like they are examining a mysterious object recovered from a crash site. If Tudor cuisine had a slogan, it would be, "It doesn't have to taste good, it just has to scare people a little." 8. When you hear sea noodles, you might picture some elegant coastal seafood pasta, the kind served at a fancy beachside restaurant. But in ancient Japan, these noodles weren't made of wheat, weren't made of seaweed. They were the eggs of a giant sea slug. And yes, they looked exactly like your brain is warning you they looked. This particular slug laid long, bright yellow ribbons of eggs, like someone squeezed out a gelatin pasta strand directly onto the ocean floor. Ancient Japanese fishermen saw that, and instead of backing away, basically said, yeah, that's probably edible. The egg ribbons were collected, rinsed, and eaten raw with a splash of soy sauce. No cooking, no steaming, no frying. Just thousands of tiny sea slug eggs sliding into your mouth like the ocean's version of caviar, but with far less glamour and far more questions. People described the flavor as slightly salty, slightly fishy, with a soft pop. Kind of like caviar's low-budget cousin. The texture? Chewy like noodles, but slippery in a way no chef wants to explain. What's wild is that in old Japanese culture, this was considered premium food, a delicacy that required skill to harvest, and a very relaxed attitude toward the fact that this came out of a sea slug 10 minutes ago. If there were a course called gourmet food for people with nerves of steel, this dish would definitely show up in week 2. 9. Garum is the undefeated champion of seasonings invented by someone who seriously overestimated the human nose. The Roman Empire treated it like liquid gold, even though the ingredient list reads like whatever's left at the bottom of a fish market dumpster. The recipe went like this. Take fish guts, fish blood, leftover bones, gills, and every part that even the neighborhood cat would refuse. Mix it with salt, toss it into a stone vat, and leave it under the Mediterranean sun for months. No stirring, no monitoring, just time, heat, and a level of optimism no modern chef would dare have. The liquid strained from this biochemical event was garum, brown, glossy, salty, and so pungent that Romans could tell exactly which household was cooking dinner just by stepping outside. The smell was so intense that the government literally passed rules forcing all garum factories outside city limits, away from homes, markets, and anywhere people valued their lungs. And yet, despite smelling like a crime, garum was a luxury item. The upper class poured it on everything: meat, bread, vegetables, even dessert. No one is sure whether they truly loved the flavor or if they just liked proving they were rich enough to enjoy something that would make everyone else at the table quietly leave the room. 10. If you think modern beer brewing is complicated, wait until you meet chicha, the ancient Andean beer that could make any craft brewery pause mid-sip. Its secret ingredient isn't industrial yeast, artisanal hops, or anything you'd find on a tasting menu. It's human saliva. The traditional method is brutally straightforward. Women in the community chew dried corn until it softens and releases enzymes. Then they spat the mush into a large clay jar filled with warm water. The enzymes in their saliva kickstart fermentation, acting like a built-in biotech lab thousands of years before the term existed. The finished chicha is lightly sour, gently sweet with corn aroma, low in alcohol, and deeply woven into rituals and festivals. To the local people, it's a tradition, skillful, communal, sacred. To anyone hearing about it for the first time, the usual reaction is, at what point in history did someone decide this was the plan? But from a survival perspective, chicha is a genius. No commercial yeast, no lab equipment. They used the one resource guaranteed to be in stock: themselves. Every batch was literally a community effort. In today's world, where people brag about handcrafted, chicha goes one step further. It's mouth-crafted. 11 people say, you eat with your eyes first. Moose nose jellied, a traditional dish from Canada and Alaska, seems specifically invented to challenge that idea. It's a glossy, quivering jelly made from the giant snout of a moose, and the cooking process sounds exactly like someone started with, let's try this and see what happens. First, the entire snout is cut off and boiled for hours until the skin, cartilage, and connective tissue soften. At that point, the stiff bristles around the nose loosen and can be plucked out. Then the softened nose meat is chopped into pieces and simmered again with spices. As the broth cools, natural gelatin from the cartilage sets the mixture into a firm, smooth block of nose jelly, a sight that tests the emotional stability of even the bravest diner. The texture is described as chewy, fatty, slightly sticky, the kind of texture that makes you question whether you should approach it with a knife, a spoon, or sheer willpower. For many indigenous communities, it's nutritious, respectful, and ensures nothing from the animal goes to waste. But for first-timers, the usual reaction is, who looked at an animal's nose and said, yes, let's turn that into gelatin? Moose nose jelly is a reminder that the history of food isn't always built on logic. Sometimes it's built on bravery, and a whole lot of natural gelatin. 12. While the modern world stores butter safely in the fridge, Ancient Ireland and Scotland chose a method that raises many questions. They buried it in bogs for centuries. The result was called bog butter, essentially butter or animal fat wrapped in hide, wood, or sometimes an actual woven basket, then pushed straight into a deep, cold, oxygen poor swamp. The outcome? Butter preserved so well that archaeologists today keep digging up 100-year-old, even 1,000-year-old blocks that are, technically speaking, still edible. No one is saying you should eat it, only that science says it won't kill you. Bog butter has a smell that defies polite description. Some describe it as a blend of sharp cheese, wet soil, and pure history. The texture is soft, slightly waxy, and tinted a brownish yellow, as if time itself mixed the color palette. For ancient people, this was a survival strategy worthy of applause. No refrigerators, but plenty of cold, acidic bogs that acted like nature's walk-in freezers. Another theory says people buried the butter on purpose to hide it from thieves, because no robber wants to wade knee-deep into a swamp hoping to find a snack. Bog butter is the perfect example of old-world innovation, not glamorous, not elegant, a little mysterious, but incredibly effective. A natural refrigerator that absolutely no one wants to smell. 13. Hakarl is the kind of dish you can smell long before you realize it's in the same building. It's made from Greenland shark, a fish whose flesh is naturally toxic thanks to loads of urea and other chemicals that immediately make the human body file a complaint. The Vikings couldn't just cook it and eat it, so they did the only thing that somehow sounds even riskier. They let it rot until it became safe. The process reads like instructions for someone with unbelievable patience. First, bury big slabs of shark meat underground and stack stones on top to press out the toxins. After a few months, dig it up, slice it into long strips, and hang them in a shed for several more months. Time, wind, and pure Icelandic stubbornness do the rest, transforming poisonous fish into a dish legally considered edible. The aroma of Hakarl has been described as a blend of ammonia, industrial cleaner, and one very poor life decision. Even the bravest chefs blink hard when taking a sniff. Many travelers describe it as a job interview between you and your nose. The taste is less dramatic than the smell, but the chewy, rubbery texture and long-lasting aftertaste leave you wondering why Iceland didn't just pick a different fish. But for them, Hakarl was survival, a food born from intelligence and limited options. Hakarl isn't a dish meant to impress. It's a dish that reminds you history was, at times, incredibly brave. 14. In the Roman Empire, the elite didn't start their mornings with bread, fruit, or anything that made normal breakfast sense. They kicked off the day with a mixture of beaten chicken eggs and sea urchin roe. It sounds like someone tried to cook a luxury dish but grabbed ingredients in the dark. Sea urchin roe was considered premium, rich, creamy, briny, unmistakably ocean-flavored. But when mixed directly into hot, fluffy chicken eggs, it became what Romans considered the height of decadence. Modern diners, on the other hand, would likely stare at it and wonder, is this brunch or a dare? The Romans whisked the two together into a dish that was soft, rich, and carried such a powerful ocean aroma you could probably identify it from 3 houses away. The luxury wasn't in the taste alone, it was in the message. You had to be wealthy enough not to care that your breakfast looked like a seafood experiment trying to return to the sea. What's funny is that it wasn't random at all. This was how the Roman elite showed power, eating the sky and the seafloor in the same bowl. If ancient fusion cuisine existed, this would be a top contender. Not everyone wants a breakfast that smells like ocean breeze arguing with an omelet. But to the Romans, that was prestige. 15. If there were an award for most luxurious ingredient that absolutely sounds like a prank, ambergris would walk on stage without competition. It's a fragrant, waxy substance found inside the gut of a sperm whale, and occasionally expelled through an exit we don't need to describe in detail. It then floats across the ocean for years, cured by sun and salt until its scent becomes soft, sweet, and so valuable that European aristocrats treated it like gold. Ambergris was used in all kinds of elite indulgences, perfumes, liqueurs, fancy desserts, even ice cream. Yes, you're imagining correctly. There were once aristocratic banquets where the dessert course included whale had a bad day flavored ice cream. The shocking twist? Ambergris actually smells pleasant, warm, sweet, slightly woody. But once you know it originates as the whale's way of protecting its intestines from razor-sharp squid beaks, that pleasant aroma becomes more philosophical than appetizing. Nobles of old ate it with pride, the kind of smug energy that practically said, I'm enjoying something the ocean literally gave up on. That's a level of confidence modern humans only dream of bringing into a boardroom. Ambergris proves that luxury cuisine isn't always about taste. Sometimes it's about being brave enough to eat something no one else wants to be in the same room with. 16. In Japan, when you buy a giant tuna, nothing goes to waste. Meat, bone, fat, every part has a purpose. But the part that earns the world's deepest respect for Japan's waste nothing philosophy is the tuna eyeball. The thing most people can barely look at for 3 seconds is in Japanese markets, cheap, common, and totally normal. Each eyeball is about the size of a small billiard ball, surrounded by muscle, nerves, and a cushion of fat. When cooked, it's usually simmered gently in soy sauce, mirin, and sake. The result? The surrounding fat turns soft and buttery, while the eyeball itself becomes chewy, slightly springy. The kind of texture where you're not sure whether you're supposed to bite it or let it figure itself out. It sounds intimidating, but the flavor is surprisingly mild. Often compared to squid or clam, the real challenge isn't the taste. It's the fact that you're eating something that, until very recently, could look back at you. The fun twist: tuna eyeballs are loaded with omega-3, collagen, and nutrients, and are considered healthier than the meat itself. Not a dare, not a novelty, just ordinary everyday food like boiled eggs or tofu. Except this snack used to make eye contact. Tuna eyeballs prove that Asian cuisine doesn't just use every part of the animal. It also challenges your entire belief system about what counts as the best part of a fish. 17. If you think jelly should stay safely in the realm of fruit cups and cute pastel desserts, the Victorians would gently put a hand on your shoulder and say, no, dear, we make jelly out of calf's feet. And they absolutely meant it. Calf's foot jelly was made by boiling a young calf's feet for hours to extract every last drop of natural collagen. As the bones and tendons dissolved, the broth thickened into a silky gel. Then it was strained, sweetened with sugar, brightened with lemon, sometimes spiked with a little alcohol, and chilled until it set. The final result was a shimmering, delicate jelly. Beautiful, as long as no one mentioned which body part it came from. This dish was considered a healing food for the sick, because Victorians believed collagen from calf's feet helped people recover faster. Not entirely wrong, but handing someone a dessert made from the part of an animal used for standing probably wasn't the most comforting bedside gesture. The flavor was described as mildly sweet, slightly fatty, with a faint bone aroma. The sort of dessert that leaves you equally curious and cautious, like eating pudding while also reviewing an anatomy diagram. To the Victorians, this was peak nourishment and culinary elegance. To the modern world, it's proof that history contains dishes that make us deeply grateful for the invention of industrial gelatin. 18. Prison loaf, also called meat neutral, is the kind of food that makes both inmates and guards agree on one thing. This isn't a meal. This is a philosophical exploration of sadness. It's used as a disciplinary measure in several U.S. prisons, designed not to nourish the spirit but to defeat it. The recipe sounds like someone swept everything off a cafeteria counter into a blender and said, yep, that'll do. Leftover vegetables, stale bread, beans, sometimes meat, sometimes not. All pulverized, mashed together, pressed into a brick, and baked until it has the texture of construction material. No seasoning, no presentation, no soul. A dish engineered to make you revisit every poor life decision. The texture is dry, dense, and indeterminate. You take a bite and genuinely cannot tell whether you're eating beans, old bread, or an abstract moral lesson. Then remember, prisons don't hand out moral lessons. They only hand out this. Many inmates describe it as a nutritional cube. Enough calories to keep you alive, not enough joy to keep you hopeful. Ironically, prison loaf is perfectly legal. It meets nutritional requirements: enough calories, enough protein, enough carbs. But it's also monotonous enough to make anyone reconsider their behavior just to avoid another serving. Prison loaf isn't food, it's policy. 19. Hardtack is the kind of food that proves the past wasn't just harsh. It was openly hostile toward human teeth. This was the classic sailor and soldier ration, made from exactly three things: flour, water, and the absolute confidence that nobody was expecting flavor. The dough was mixed, rolled out thick like patio tiles, punched with a few holes, and baked until every molecule of moisture gave up and moved on. The result was a cracker as hard as bathroom ceramic, able to last for months, years, even decades. with the same fresh taste it had on day one. And by fresh taste, we mean absolutely no taste at all. Soldiers gave hardtack all kinds of affectionate nicknames: toothbreaker, ration brick, and light combat weapon. Many couldn't bite it directly and had to use rocks, rifle butts, or their boot heel just to crack it in half. And before eating, they'd always check for bonus protein, because hardtack was basically luxury real estate for weevils. If it moved, congratulations, extra calories. The most common way to eat it was to soak it in hot coffee until it softened. After about 20-30 minutes, it finally transitioned from construction material to chewable. Hardtack was nobody's favorite food, but every army relied on it for one simple reason: it was cheap, durable, and no cook ever had to hear a complaint like, "This bread is a little dry today." Hardtack was always dry. That was its entire personality. 20. If you think cheese must come from cows, goats, or at least some creature with a functioning milk system, the Aztecs would gladly invite you to sit down and say, "No, cheese can also come from a lake." Their version, often called lake cheese, was made from spirulina, a bright green layer of algae floating on the water like someone spilled a bucket of neon paint and just walked away. The process was simple, efficient, and scientifically chaotic. Aztec workers skimmed the green foam off the lake with nets, squeezed out the water, sun-dried the paste, and shaped it into cakes. These spirulina bricks were packed with nutrients, loaded with protein, lasted forever, and looked exactly like tiny pool tiles someone forgot to glaze. The flavor was described as salty, umami, and kind of like queso that camped outdoors for 72 hours. Spanish conquistadors wrote about watching Aztecs snack on lake cheese with the same expression people have when they walk into the wrong Zoom meeting: confused, concerned, but too polite to interrupt. To them, the dish felt like chewing salty, edible pond moss. But credit where it's due. This was one of the smartest foods in history. The Aztecs had no cows, no dairy, but they did have a lake overflowing with free, renewable protein. They treated it like an ancient startup with perfect efficiency: no fields, no herds, no cost, just sunlight and a net. Lake cheese proves that not all cuisine begins in a kitchen. Sometimes it begins with someone looking down at a shimmering green lake and saying, "Yeah, that'll work." 21. In many parts of the world, if you saw an ear of corn swollen, lumpy, and pitch black like it just survived an alien abduction, you'd toss it out and call the agricultural hotline. But in Mexico, people look at the exact same thing and say, "Perfect, tacos tonight." Huitlacoche, also known as corn smut, is a parasitic fungus that infects corn kernels, making them balloon outward and turn a smoky gray-black. It looks exactly like the corn is sprouting a backup brain. Yet this strange mutation is one of Mexico's most beloved ingredients. Some high-end restaurants even call it Mexican truffle, a beautifully crafted marketing phrase that helps you forget you're technically eating a plant disease. The flavor, surprisingly, is fantastic. Earthy, smoky, deeply umami, like roasted corn mixed with wild mushrooms. The texture is soft and aromatic, the complete opposite of its horror movie appearance. The Aztecs have eaten huitlacoche for hundreds of years, treating it like a nutrient-rich delicacy. Meanwhile, European farmers who see the same fungus scream, "My entire crop is doomed," and fall to their knees. Same organism, two completely different emotional reactions. Huitlacoche proves that food isn't always about what looks pretty. Sometimes it's about whether you can look at a diseased ear of corn and confidently say, "Yeah, throw it in the pot." 22. In Antarctica, there are no trees, no vegetables, no grocery stores, and absolutely no restaurant menus. The only things available in abundance are ice, brutal wind, and penguins. So for sailors and hunters of the past, the food choices were painfully straightforward: eat penguin or eat nothing. That's how the Antarctic salted penguin came to exist. The recipe is brutally practical. Catch a penguin, skin it, cut the meat into chunks, and bury it under an overwhelming amount of salt so it survives long expeditions. The salt level is so extreme that the meat basically enters eternal preservation mode. Safe to eat, yes. Pleasant? Absolutely not. The taste has been described as intensely salty, slightly fishy, and tougher than a piece of meat actively fighting back. Some sailors said it smelled like beef boiled in concentrated ocean water. Not ideal, but when you're standing in 40-degree C wind, the definition of tasty becomes extremely flexible. What makes the dish even more mentally challenging is the penguin itself. Cute, approachable, waddling around with big innocent eyes that seemed to ask, "Are you sure about this?" But for explorers, reality was simple. Survival doesn't care about charm. Salted penguin is proof that sometimes culinary history isn't born from creativity. It's born from looking around your frozen surroundings and saying, well, they're all we've got. 23 sea cow cucumber is one of those foods that makes everyone react the same way the first time they hear it. Ah, that sounds cute. Then they see it, and the cuteness evaporates instantly. A sea cucumber is a long, boneless, squishy creature that looks like a rubber toy abandoned on the ocean floor for several centuries. Despite its mildly alarming appearance, sea cucumber is a luxury delicacy across much of Asia. But before it ever reaches a dining table, it must endure a prep process that feels like a beauty pageant boot camp. Sun drying, smoking, soaking, boiling, soaking again. A cycle that can take days or even weeks, all for the sake of turning this ocean oddity from seafloor decoration into edible item. Its flavor is almost non-existent, but the texture, unforgettable. Chewy, springy, slightly slippery, and capable of absorbing seasonings like a sponge. Sea Cucumber is basically the Hollywood actor with no lines who still appears in every scene because the director loves the energy. Chefs describe it as swimming gelatin. First timers describe it more honestly, like chewing a rubber band. A rubber band that used to live underwater. The funny thing is, sea cucumber is considered extremely nutritious and has been used as medicine for centuries. That alone probably explains why people kept trying to make it taste good. Because if we relied on looks alone, nobody would point at one and say, yes, that looks delicious. Sea cucumber is proof that sometimes fine dining begins with the sentence, I'm not sure this is food, but let's try it anyway. 24 Scottish cuisine has always been brutally honest. No fancy plating, no optical illusions, just food that looks exactly like what it is. And scurly, also known as hot oat fried in beef or mutton fat, is the purest embodiment of that get straight to the point energy. The recipe is almost aggressively simple. Take raw oats, toss them into a pan of screaming hot animal fat, stir until golden, crisp, and fragrant. The result is a dish so rich and crunchy it could make an entire room of cardiologists slowly turn away. Scurly works as a topping, a side dish, stuffing for poultry, or sometimes something you eat directly with a spoon. For poor Scots centuries ago, it was the perfect way to turn cheap ingredients into enough calories to survive a climate with only two settings, cold and colder. And the taste? Nutty, savory, deeply satisfying. The kind of delicious that makes you say, I'll go for a run later. You won't, but you'll say it. If you want a mental image of scurly, imagine granola, but the Jim Bro edition, soaked in animal fat instead of honey. A dish that really highlights the contrast between healthy cuisine and food that survived centuries by refusing to care about the word healthy. Scurly helps explain why Scots are famously tough. If you grow up eating oats fried in pure fat, the universe can throw anything at you, and you'll probably just shrug. 25. Most people bake bread, then put it in a container. But sometime in the 19th century, a baker looked at an empty tin can, looked at a bowl of batter, and said, yeah, let's just cook it in the can. And thus canned bread was born. The only baked good that makes you feel like you're opening damp construction material. The process is simple. Pour the batter into a metal can, seal it, steam, or bake it, and when it's done, open both ends and push. A perfect cylindrical loaf slides out like a prop from a low-budget sci-fi movie. No crispy crust, no warm bakery aroma, just a moist, suspiciously smooth bread tube. The flavor? Honestly, not bad. But the texture? Unusual. So soft it feels like you're eating slices of bread that have been through emotional hardship. Some people describe it as bread that forgot to grow up. The upside is that canned bread lasts forever, travels well, and was perfect for laborers, sailors, and frontier settlers. The downside is that it doesn't really look like bread, more like a lab experiment waiting for FDA approval. Canned bread is a reminder of a time when humans believed in one simple rule. If it stores well, who cares if it looks like breakfast or building material? 26 potted pigeon is the kind of dish that proves one thing about the past. People back then had a deep, spiritual, borderline romantic relationship with butter. They believed butter could preserve anything meat, bread, dignity and they decided to test that theory on pigeons. The method is beautifully direct. Cook the pigeon, shred the meat, pack it tightly into a jar, then drown the whole thing under a thick layer of hot, golden butter. Once cooled, the butter forms a solid seal, a medieval calorie wall that locks everything inside. Open the jar and you'll see soft meat hiding under what looks like a lid made of solid dairy. Potted pigeons could last for months, which made them popular with both nobles and commoners. But the aesthetic? Unforgettable. It looks like a fancy jar of skincare cream, yet inside is bird meat, a product that screams spa day on the outside but whispers field rations on the inside. The flavor? Rich, heavy, and rich again. The butter dominates everything. You don't eat pigeon, you eat butter that happens to be babysitting pigeon pieces. Potted pigeon represents a whole historical era built on one philosophy. When in doubt, add more butter. 27 lamprey pie is solid proof that medieval Europe had taste buds so adventurous, modern people reading about it have to double check the translation. Because lampreys aren't fish. They're prehistoric, jawless, scaleless creatures with tube-shaped mouths full of circular rows of teeth. Basically a horror movie prop that accidentally became food. For some reason, this nightmare noodle was considered a luxury, especially by the English royals. Why? No one knows. Maybe because lampreys looked terrifying, people assumed they must taste amazing. Medieval logic. The pie itself was made by stewing lampreys in wine and spices, sometimes in their own blood, then wrapping the whole ordeal in pastry. The name sounds elegant. The filling sounds like what you cook when the 12th century runs out of options. And then came the famous incident. King Henry I of England ate way too much lamprey pie despite his doctor telling him to stop. Shortly afterward, he died. Not in battle, not from an assassin, but from overeating a pastry filled with a blood-sucking sea creature. If history had an award for most unexpected way to go, Henry V would be a finalist. A king who ruled an empire, taken out by dinner. Lamprey pie isn't just a dish. It's a reminder that sometimes the thing that defeats you isn't your enemy. It's what you ordered. 28. Before London became a city of artisan coffee and buttered croissants, it was once the proud home of eel pie. And not the glamorous imported kind, we're talking Thames River eels, the same river that today inspires people to walk faster and breathe less. The dish made perfect sense back then. Eels were everywhere, cheap, easy to catch, and so plentiful around busy neighborhoods that basically anyone could become a part-time fisherman. You clean the eel, chop it up, toss it in a pastry crust with a bit of veg and maybe some seasoning, or none at all if you were working class. Then bake it into a pie. And voila! Eel pie. It looks innocent from the outside, but once you cut into it, the filling resembles a few creatures trying to escape the scene. The taste? A little fishy, a little meaty, a little I ate this because life gave me no alternatives. Londoners ate eel pie because it was cheap, practical, and filling. Modern people look at it and whisper, our ancestors were built differently. Eating eel pie wasn't just eating eel, it was consuming the entire survival spirit of an era where the menu had exactly two sections, cheap and very cheap. Eel pie proves that sometimes food history starts with a simple rule: eat whatever you can catch. 29. If you've ever looked at a dish and thought, why is it looking back at me? Congratulations. You're ready to meet stargazy pie, the only dinner that judges you while you're trying to eat it. Stargazy pie comes from Cornwall, England. The ingredients sound perfectly harmless. Small fish, usually pilchards, eggs, potatoes, herbs, and a nice creamy sauce. All very normal, until you learn about the presentation. The fish heads are intentionally left sticking out of the crust, pointing upward as if they're praying for a different ending. The purpose is actually practical. The oils from the heads drip down into the filling, making the pie richer. But the visual effect? Completely unhinged. When the dish hits the table, you're greeted by 6 or 7 tiny fish faces poking out of the golden crust, like a group of friends watching fireworks while unfortunately trapped under pastry. The flavor is praised as rich, savory, and deeply of the sea. But diners fall into two camps. One, people from Cornwall, proud and unfazed, delicious, tradition, perfect. Two, the rest of humanity. I didn't expect eye contact at dinner. Stargazy pie proves that British cuisine isn't bland. It just sometimes stares at you. 30. No dish in food history screams, looks over taste louder than boiled peacock, a bird that gets fully cooked, then fully dressed again. Medieval nobles didn't just want to eat a peacock. They wanted to eat a peacock that looked like it hadn't been eaten. The process started with carefully plucking the feathers so the entire plume stayed intact. Then the bird was boiled or roasted. Even though peacock meat is famously dry, tough, and about as joyful as homework, but the real magic was in the styling. Once the cooking was done, the chefs redraped the entire feather suit over the carcass, fanned out the tail, and sometimes even gilded the beak. At fancy feasts, servants would carry it in like a royal procession, as if the bird had risen from the dead just to make a fabulous entrance. The taste? No one praised it. Not a single historical note says delicious. All the commentary focused on one thing: the presentation. This wasn't a dish, it was a flex. You didn't serve roasted peacock to enjoy it. You served it so your guests would think, wow, the host is rich enough to bring out a dish nobody actually wants to eat. Boiled peacock is a monument to the era when people believed if you're going to kill a peacock, at least let it die glamorous. And with that, you've survived the full journey. 30 dishes our ancestors once considered normal. From dessert made with whale gut perfume to pies filled with fish staring at you, you've just walked through a chapter of culinary history textbooks refuse to mention. If you feel braver now, or your stomach is quietly questioning your life choices, that's perfectly normal. And if you like this kind of historical things you shouldn't eat, but absolutely should know about, well, you know what to do. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next round of bizarre foods humanity proudly called cuisine. See you on the next adventure.